When Eli Carrian's wife died, something in the house died with her. Not just the warmth, not just the laughter. It was as if time itself had stopped, frozen in grief. His twin daughters, Grace and Willa, only 8 years old, responded in a way no one could explain. One stopped speaking, the other stopped eating, and neither had slept properly in over a month. No nanny lasted more than a week. The girls didn't scream. They didn't throw tantrums or act wild. It would have been easier if they had. Instead, they just stopped. No sound, no movement. They curled together in the nursery corner like porcelain dolls forgotten on a shelf. Pale, still, eyes wide and glassy, not looking at anything in particular, blinking slowly like the world had slipped too far away to pull them back. The house became a tomb of silence. Floorboards didn't dare creak. The wind outside seemed to hold its breath as it passed the windows. Eli, a man who had once ridden bulls and branded cattle with hands steady as steel, now stood hollow in his own home. He didn't cry, didn't speak much either, just clenched his hat and looked past people, like he was trying to see something that no longer existed. Then Clara arrived. She came alone, with no references, no expectations. Just a small bag, worn boots, and a quiet way of looking at things that unsettled some and comforted others. She didn't ask about the girls. She didn't need to. Eli hired her without a word, maybe because he didn't have words left, maybe because she didn't ask for them. The moment Clara stepped into the nursery, the weight of silence pressed down around her. She saw them, Grace and Willa, huddled in that same corner, their limbs tucked in, breath so shallow it barely stirred their nightgowns. Someone had brushed their hair. Their dresses were clean, stiff with starch, but there were no ribbons, no color, just control, cleanliness, a desperate kind of order. Clara said nothing. She didn't call to them or ask questions. She knelt slowly and placed a small wooden horse on the rug hand carved, smoothed at the edges from use. She set it in a patch of sunlight and left it there. No reaction, not even a blink, but she stayed, sitting against the far wall, and began to read. Not a children's story, not something silly or soothing. She read The Secret Garden. Her voice was low, even, not sing-song, not sweet, just steady, like a heartbeat in a quiet room. The girls didn't look at her, but they didn't move away either. That night, Clara stood on the back porch. The moon was high over the ridge. The air was cold. Eli joined her, standing beside her without a word, as he had likely done with his wife before. Clara didn't ask about the nannies who came and left. She didn't ask about his wife, or the illness, or the details carved on the gravestone behind the house. But she knew silence like this. She knew it wasn't empty. It was full of all the things people were too broken to say out loud. "Do you know what happened?" she asked softly. His jaw clenched. "Their mother died. She was 28, Clara said quietly. "That's young." He nodded once. "You buried her here." Another nod. Clara didn't press. She just let the quiet expand between them like fog. As she turned to go inside, he finally spoke. "Don't go into her room." Clara paused. He didn't explain. Didn't have to. The next morning, the girls were just as still. Grace hadn't moved from her spot. Willa watched Clara with half-closed eyes, not in fear, not in distrust, but in study. Clara left a single peach on the windowsill and let the breeze do the coaxing. So far, no words, no food, no sleep. But something in the house had shifted. The silence wasn't fighting anymore. It was listening. "Do you think Clara can heal what was broken? Stay with us and see what unfolds in this quiet house where nothing is said, but everything matters." Clara returned to the nursery the next morning with the same quiet resolve as before. No tray of breakfast this time. No cheerful attempts at small talk. Just the worn book in her hands and that wooden horse still resting in the patch of light where she'd left it. Grace and Willa remained in the corner, unmoved. The room felt like a place between worlds. Somewhere grief had taken root and grown still, like frost on glass. Clara settled onto the rug near the wall, opened the cracked spine of The Secret Garden, and began to read. Her voice, soft and even, moved through the space like sunlight through dust. There was no lift in her tone, no attempt to perform for her small audience. Each word was spoken as if it existed only for the sake of existing, not to persuade, not to teach. Time passed differently in that room. Clara didn't watch the clock. She let the words carry her forward. She read of locked gardens and forgotten keys, of hidden places and children who had been lost in silence. Willa blinked once, just once, but Clara saw it. By the Thutu morning, Clara changed the rhythm. No more breakfast trays that went untouched, no coaxing with porridge or milk. Just a single peach placed on the windowsill, its scent carried on the breeze. She didn't point it out. She simply let it be, the same way she let the girls be. On the Thusau day, Willa reached for it. She didn't eat the whole thing, just touched it, held it, turned it in her hands like something unfamiliar. Then, a bite. Small, hesitant, but real. She left the rest beside her, untouched again, but the mark of her teeth was a turning point. Clara didn't mention it. She just kept reading. Downstairs, Eli had begun to change too. Not with words, but with presence. He started waiting near the nursery door, not stepping in, but listening. His shoulders, once held tight as rope, now rested just a little lower. He didn't speak to Clara about the girls. He didn't need to. But he watched her with the look of a man balancing hope and fear so carefully he didn't dare breathe too deep. That night, as Clara prepared tea, she caught sight of him from the porch window. He stood beneath the same ridge where the moon always rose. This time, he didn't seem lost in memory. He just stood still, breathing in the night like it might not hurt as much anymore. In the nursery, Grace's position had shifted. She no longer curled in the same tight knot. Her legs were unfolded, her head resting on Willa's shoulder. A subtle change, but one Clara didn't miss. She closed the book for the evening, her thumb tucked gently between pages. The room was quiet, but no longer hollow. It had changed texture. The silence was no longer an enemy. It was becoming a companion, something that held space instead of swallowing it. When Clara stood to leave, Willa's eyes met hers. Just for a thuhai. Not fearful, not pleading, just seeing. That, too, was something. A week ago, the girls had been ghosts of themselves. Now, a peach had been bitten. A book had been heard. A glance had been returned. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with a breakthrough. Sometimes it starts with a story read softly in a room that forgot how to breathe. Do you believe an old story about a locked garden could wake a child who shut the world out? Maybe it already has. Keep watching. This is just the beginning. It was on the Thu Chin day that Grace spoke. Clara had taken her usual place near the wall, reading softly from the secret garden. Her voice moved like water, steady and low, letting the rhythm of the story fill the air. Willa sat nearby, hands tucked into her lap, watching Clara with quiet curiosity. Grace lay with her back turned, her breathing even but shallow. Then, in the stillness between one paragraph and the next, a sound slipped through the room. Mama. It was barely a whisper, more breath than voice. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't pause, didn't look up or break the cadence of her reading. She simply let the next sentence follow, letting the story carry forward as though nothing had changed. But everything had. That night, Eli waited for Clara on the porch again. The bottle was already open, 2 tin cups sitting beside him. His eyes were fixed on the stars, his boots planted in the dust like they might keep him grounded. She spoke, Clara said quietly as she sat beside him. He didn't reply. He just poured the whiskey, passed her a cup, and drank his in one long swallow. I think she's waiting, Clara added. Grace, for the truth, whatever it is. Eli exhaled hard, the sound catching in his throat. Then, after a long pause, he said, she was pregnant, lost the baby, got sick after, never really came back from it. Clara said nothing. She just listened, her fingers wrapped around the cup, warming against the metal. She smiled that day, Eli continued, his voice rough. Laughed, played the piano, told me to take the girls riding, said she needed the house to herself. I thought she was getting better. Lode. Clara turned to look at him, but he wasn't looking at her. His gaze was distant, fixed somewhere behind memory. She used laudanum, he said. Locked the door. Left the letter where I'd find it. He didn't say what the letter said. Not then. Clara didn't press. She didn't leave a note for them, he added after a moment. Just for me. I told them she went away. I thought I was protecting them. But they saw, Clara said softly. He nodded. They were looking for her scarf. They found her thuniyat. Clara's throat tightened. The image hit hard and fast. Two girls, too young to understand, staring at a mother who wouldn't wake up, one of them holding her hand, the other whispering her name. I never told them the truth, Eli said, and I think they've been trying to figure out what they did wrong ever since. The next day, Clara passed the room at the end of the hall. The one Eli told her not to enter. She didn't mean to stop. Her hand found the knob before her mind caught up. It was cold to the touch, smooth, polished, no dust. Someone had been turning it. The door opened without a sound. Inside, the room was perfectly kept. The bed made, the mirror clean, a brush on the vanity, a scarf still hanging from the chair. Everything preserved as if she might return any minute. Clara didn't step far. Just enough to see the space as it had been left. She saw the book on the nightstand, open to page 219. A bookmark slipped between the pages. A letter, neatly folded, tucked beneath the mirror's edge. No name written on it. But Clara knew. She took the letter and stepped back, closing the door gently behind her. That evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, she waited for Eli on the porch. The letter rested in the pocket of her apron. He approached slowly, dust on his coat, weariness in his step. You went in, he said. I did. You read it? Not yet. He nodded, then sat beside her, staring out at the hills. I don't want to hurt you, Clara said. But if that letter holds the reason your daughters can't sleep, can't eat, can't speak, then maybe it's time you stop hiding from it. He didn't speak, just took the letter from her hand, held it between his fingers like it might shatter. She wrote it the night before, he whispered. Clara didn't ask what it said. Not yet. Some truths come too heavy to carry all at once. But deep down, they both knew that inside that folded page was a piece of the pain still living in that house. A key to the silence. Do you think the letter holds the reason Grace finally whispered, Mama? Maybe it's something Eli has never been ready to read. Not until now. Eli didn't read the letter right away. He carried it around for a day and a night, folded and untouched, like a wound he wasn't ready to open. It stayed in the breast pocket of his coat, close to his heart, but sealed off from it. Clara noticed the way his hand kept brushing over it when he thought no one was watching. She didn't ask again. Some things, she knew, had to break open on their own. When he finally did read it, he did so alone. The fire had burned low. The house was still. The girls had gone to sleep, and Clara was sitting near the stove, mending a torn hem, when she heard the soft rustle of paper. He stood in the doorway, lit only by the flicker of the flames, the letter shaking slightly in his grip. He read it once, then again. Then he folded it slowly, precisely, and stepped outside without a word. Clara followed. He didn't say anything for a long time. The wind moved through the trees, soft and constant, like something breathing. She wrote it to me, Eli said finally. Said she was tired. Said she didn't want to leave, but the pain, it was louder than us. Clara said nothing. She knew when words were too small. She thought I'd be better off. Thought the girls would forget her quicker without watching her fall apart. She didn't understand. His voice cracked. They didn't need her perfect. They just needed her here. He opened the stove door and stared into the embers. Then, gently, he placed the letter inside. It caught almost instantly. Paper curling, ink vanishing, a lifetime of pain disappearing into heat. She asked me not to hate her, he said. You don't, Clara replied. No, he whispered. I never could. The next morning, Clara gathered the girls in the nursery. Willa sat with her doll. Grace stared at her lap. Fingers knotted in her dress. There's something I want to tell you, Clara said gently. They looked up, not scared, just waiting. Your mama didn't leave because of you, Clara began. She left because her heart was hurting in a way no one could see. She tried to stay. She really did. But sometimes, even love isn't enough to fight what's inside. Grace's lip trembled. Her voice was barely there. Was she sad? Clara nodded. Yes, but she also loved you more than anything. So much that she tried to hide the sadness, tried to protect you from it. Willa whispered, "Did we do something wrong?" "No," Clara said firmly. "Not a thing. She left a letter for your papa, and in it she said she loved you both more than the whole world." There was a long silence. Not empty, just full. That night, Grace asked to sleep in her mother's room. Eli stood in the hallway, hand on the doorframe, unsure. But he nodded. Clara changed the sheets, opened the window, and let the wind carry out what grief still lingered there. The girls lay curled on the bed, side by side. Clara sat in the chair nearby and read aloud from the book left on the nightstand. Eli watched from the doorway, unmoving. And for the thunyut time in weeks, the Carrian house did not ache with silence. It held something else, something slower, something soft. Later, when the fire burned low and the house had gone quiet again, Clara stood outside, watching the dark ridge beyond the barn. The stars blinked faintly above, like reminders that even things long gone could still shine. She thought of the letter, of what it took to write it, of what it cost to keep it hidden, and of what might happen now that the truth had been spoken aloud. Have you ever kept a secret, thinking it would shield the ones you love, only to find it made the silence heavier? Sometimes it's not the pain that breaks us. It's what we never said. The thunyut time Judd Carrian appeared. He didn't announce himself with violence. He arrived on horseback just past noon, his long coat dusty, a satchel slung over one shoulder, and a rifle strapped behind the saddle. He moved like a man who believed the world owed him something and was willing to take it. Clara saw him, thunyut. She stepped out onto the porch before he reached the steps. Her eyes were calm, but her stance said otherwise. "You must be the new help," he said, voice rough with whiskey and smugness. "I'm Judd, Eli's brother." "Half-brother," Clara replied. He smirked. "Blood's blood, sweetheart. This land belongs to the Carrians, and I'm one of them." "This land belongs to Eli," she said. "You're not welcome here." Judd's smile faded a fraction. "You speak for him now?" "No," Clara said. "I speak for the people under this roof. If you've got business, you wait till Eli's home." Judd stepped onto the porch. His boots hit the wood like warning shots. "You got grit," he muttered, glancing past her toward the faint sound of children's footsteps inside. "But grit don't change bloodlines. Or debts." Clara didn't move. "Tie your horse. You can wait outside, or you can ride on." He leaned closer. "You always this charming? I've got coffee on the stove and a shotgun by the door. You can have one, not both." For a moment, the air between them went still. Then Eli spoke from behind the gate. "Step off my porch, Judd." Judd turned slowly. "Well, there's the prodigal son." "You're not family," Eli said. "Not here. Not to me." "That's not how the law sees it," Judd replied. "You got the land when the old man died, but I never signed anything. Maybe I'm just here to collect what's mine." You're here to stir trouble," Eli said. "Same as always." Judd shrugged. "You think 2 girls and a tired man can keep this place running forever? You need help." "I don't need help from a man who tried to steal from his own kin," Eli snapped. Judd's smile returned, mean and cold. "Still got that temper." He turned to leave, but not before locking eyes with Clara. "You should be careful. That kind of fire burns things down." He rode off slow, deliberate, like a man who wanted to be followed. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Neither could Eli. The wind howled harder than usual, pushing against the walls like a warning. The girls were tucked into their beds, the lanterns dimmed, but the silence inside the house was too tight to ignore. Clara heard it thunyut, a soft crackling sound in the distance. Then Eli's voice cutting through the dark. "Fire." They both ran. The barn was already half engulfed, flames licking the sky, bright orange against the blackness. The dry beams caught quick. The hay turned to kindling. The scent of smoke and burning oil filled the air. Clara grabbed a bucket. Eli tore off his coat and began beating at the flames. Together, they fought, side by side, shadows flickering across the yard. By the time the fire died, the barn was lost. The horses had been out in the pasture, spared only by chance. But the structure was gone, blackened skeletons of beams twisted against the moonlight. Eli stood with his hands on his knees, breath ragged, sweat and soot streaking his face. He did this, Clara said. Eli didn't argue. Inside, the girls had woken. Grace stood on the porch, eyes wide, clutching Willa's hand. The firelight danced in their faces. Clara turned to Eli. This isn't just about land. He wants to tear this place apart. Eli's jaw clenched. Then we stop him. That. The fire smoldered behind them, but the threat had only begun to burn. Judd wasn't finished, and now he knew just how much they had to lose. The moon hung low over the ridge the night Judd came back. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 riders flanked him, slipping through the tree line like shadows with intent. One carried a torch. The other had a coil of rope slung across his saddle. Their faces were hard, unreadable. Judd led the way, calm and slow, as if he owned the dirt beneath their boots. But the house wasn't asleep. Clara stood at the window, watching the silhouettes move across the yard. Beside the door, Eli checked the rifle, chambered a round, and nodded once. The fire crackled low behind them. In the pantry, the girls slept, tucked behind sacks of flour and jars of preserves, unaware or pretending to be. Judd stopped just beyond the porch. He didn't call out, didn't knock. He simply dismounted and waited. Eli opened the door. You came, he said. You'd smiled. You figured I would. I figured you wouldn't know when to stop. Judd stepped forward, lifting the edge of his coat just enough to show the grip of a pistol. I'm not here to talk, he said. I'm here to finish what should have been settled years ago. Then try, Eli replied. But Judd didn't move. Not yet. The other 2 dismounted behind him, silent, waiting. Clara stepped outside, rifle in her hands. Judd turned to her with mock surprise. Still here? Thought maybe you'd have more sense. Lon. She's family, Eli said. Just like the girls. Judd laughed. You don't get to redefine blood, brother. I don't need to, Eli said. I raised them. I held them through every scream, every silence. That makes them mine. You only come when something's burning. The tension broke like a snapped wire. You'd reached. Eli fired Thunyet. The sound cracked the night open. Judd staggered backward, clutching his side. His men scattered. One fell. The other vanished into the trees. Clara stepped forward, raised her rifle, and fired a warning shot into the air. Horses screamed. The wind picked up. Smoke still lingered from the burnt barn, mixing with the fresh powder in the air. Judd collapsed to the dirt, groaning, blood dark against his coat. Eli stood over him, rifle still steady. You should have stayed gone, he said. Judd coughed, tried to grin through pain. You never deserved any of it. Not the land, not her, not them. Eli's voice was steel. You think claiming blood makes you a father? You think burning what we built makes you a man? You never understood love, only how to use it. Lanterns appeared at the ridgeline. Riders approached, not Judd's men this time. The sheriff's posse, thundering down the hill, too late for the Thunyat shot, but just in time to see the end. Clara lowered her weapon. Eli stepped back. The sheriff dismounted, knelt beside Judd, and checked the wound. He'll live, he muttered. More's the pity. They loaded Judd onto a stretcher. He didn't speak again. Not to Clara, not to Eli, not to anyone. As the wagon rolled away, Eli stood at the edge of the porch, watching until the shadows swallowed it whole. Inside, the girls peeked from behind the pantry door. Clara knelt. It's over, she whispered. He won't hurt you again. They ran to Eli. He dropped to his knees, arms wide. Grace clung to him, Thunyat. Then Willa. No words were needed. Not after this. He held them close, head bowed, breath shaking. Clara watched from the doorway, heart full, eyes wet. Have you ever seen a man fight not because he had to, but because love gave him no choice? Because blood doesn't make you a father. Standing between danger and your children does. Spring returned to the Carrian ranch like a promise gently kept. The barn had been rebuilt, stronger this time, with beams that caught the light like new skin over an old wound. Wildflowers climbed along the fences, and the garden Clara planted in haphazard rows began to bloom in straight lines and soft colors. Grace ran barefoot through the morning dew, collecting beans with dirt on her dress and sun on her cheeks. Willa followed close behind, hair wild, clutching a basket full of crooked carrots and lopsided potatoes. Their laughter echoed across the yard, lighter now, like it no longer carried the weight of ghosts. Eli whistled again, not often, and never loudly, just a few low notes when he patched the porch rail or saddled the mare. But Clara noticed. It was the kind of sound that only returns when a man begins to believe in mornings again. She didn't speak of the fire or the night Judd had come with rope and gun. Neither did he. Some things are better left behind once they've been survived. Instead, they lived. They planted. They fished. They braided ribbons into hair and baked bread that cracked golden at the edges. They sat together on the porch in the evenings, feet bare, legs swinging, watching the wind stir the grass like a hymn no one remembered the words to. But healing doesn't erase the past. It grows around it, like roots curling through stone. By early fall, Clara noticed the change. Eli coughed more. He moved slower. His hands trembled slightly when he poured coffee. At Thunyut, he brushed it off dust, old lungs, the chill in the air. But the lines around his mouth deepened, the shadows beneath his eyes darkened. One morning, he fell while chopping wood. Clara found him staring up at the sky, breath short. "Funny," he said, "how blue it gets before snow." The doctor came. The words were kind, but the meaning wasn't. Something in the lungs. Too deep. Not long now. Eli didn't argue. He just asked to go home. He spent his last days beside the fire, wrapped in quilts, telling stories he'd never shared before. About his wife, about the baby they lost, about the fear he carried after, and about the moment Clara walked through his door and the house began to breathe again. Grace read to him from Black Beauty. Willa drew pictures of birds and pasted them to the window. Clara stayed beside him through every coughing fit, every long silence, every soft confession that came in the hours before sleep. "I should have told them sooner," he said once. "You told them when it mattered," she answered. On a quiet December morning, with frost on the window panes and firelight dancing on the walls, Eli Carrian slipped away. Grace was curled against one arm, Willa against the other. Clara held his hand until the warmth left it. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'll carry them now." The funeral was small. The valley turned up in coats and quiet. The girls placed a painted birdhouse at his grave, with ribbons tied to the roof and a note tucked inside that simply read, "Thank you." End of. Clara sat alone long after the others left, letting the snow settle on her skirt and the silence wrap around her shoulders. Then she stood, brushed the frost from her sleeves, and walked the girls home. The years that followed were not easy, but they were full. Grace grew into a sharp-eyed girl with steady hands and a hunger for stories. Willa drew everything she saw and began painting what she dreamed. Clara stayed. She never remarried. Not because she couldn't, but because her heart had already settled. She kept Eli's chair by the fire. She kept the ribbon Willa gave her. And in the softest hours before dawn, she sometimes heard a low whistle drifting through the walls like memory. If you ever believed that blood alone defines a family, perhaps you've never seen a woman like Clara. Because sometimes the truest families are not the ones we're born into, but the ones we choose to hold when the world asks us to let go.